Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our live demo and AMA session today with Flipside Crypto. My name is Angie Villarreal. I'm part of the Business Development Division at Horizen, and I'm super excited and glad to be here today with you all. So before we begin, I would like to announce that there's going to be a giveaway for all of you. So all of you will get a 15% discount in our Horizen store. And at the end, we're going to have the Q&A session where Rowan and Angela are going to pick the top questions, and these persons are going to take 20%, $20 US discount in our Horizen store as well. So make sure you stay with us to check it out, pay attention, and ask a lot of questions. So today I have here with me Angela Minster. She is the data scientist at Flipside Crypto, and she's going to explain to us how the data cooperative works analyzing our Horizen blockchain. As well, we have Rowan Stone. He is our business development director and operations at Horizen. So now I'll welcome them both, and I'll pass the word to Angela so she can introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Angela. Do I start sharing my screen now? I'll just do it. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So hi everyone, I'm Angela. I'm a data scientist at Flipside Crypto. I want to say thank you to Horizen and Angie and Rowan and for putting this together. I'm really excited to share what we've been working on with everyone, and I think it's really amazing what a great community Horizen has supporting it. So we're a blockchain analytics firm. We're devoted to building products that source data from as many blockchains and crypto projects as possible so that we can build BI tools and other data tools for mostly projects, but also, of course, the communities and the people that support those projects and are interested in them. We have data from a lot of different blockchains at this point. We gather our data through a process that we call chain walking. Basically, we synthesize many different chains in such a way that we are able to more or less straightforwardly compare data coming from chain to chain, which is a pretty big undertaking, and we're adding new chains every single day. And the purpose of incorporating data the way that we do is to not just to be able to go deep on any specific chain or project or ERC20 token, whatever it is, but also to do it in such a way that we can compare the results that we get, where possible, from chain to chain to chain or project to project. Our co-op product is one example of this. It's one of our few public-facing products, although we have a lot of client-specific products. For example, our relationship with Horizen started in 2019, so we've been working with them for a little while, and now we're really happy to partner with them on this co-op project so that all of you can see a more detailed view of their data. Yeah, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at the co-op product for Horizen. So like I said, the purpose of the co-op is to introduce a layer of transparency from a project, or in this case from Horizen, to the public. So this co-op and all of the other ones are updated in live or nearly live time. And I'm going to walk you through all of the parts of Horizen. But before I do, I'll say a little bit about what it takes to get the Horizen data into a format that can actually be displayed on this page, and also what we are unable to display because of Horizen's unique facets. So first of all, Horizen, as you know, is a UTXO style chain. So there is the question of, for any particular transaction, how do you say who sent how much then to whom? That is a really hard question to answer on a UTXO chain without a little bit of work first. So we have an algorithm that we use to cluster addresses by mostly by whether or not they show up together as inputs in a transaction, but we do have a little bit more on top of that because it's not 100% reliable to just say anytime two addresses are together on the input side of a transaction, they must belong to the same entity. So we use this algorithm to cluster addresses into entities, and then we can say this entity sent this much Zen to this entity. One happy thing about Horizen is that once the entity clustering was done, we could actually see who is sending what to whom. Now, sometimes when we talk about being able to see what's happening on a blockchain, it does make some people nervous because they think that we're looking for like individual level data, trying to see actual people and observe an individual's behavior. But we're really not. This is quite aggregated, and for the most part, we have no idea who might own an entity other than how they behave. So if you look at this circular chart on the left side, we break down the who of this blockchain, the who in Horizen, into the following categories. We have exchanges, and I'll talk in a minute about how we find them. We have the foundation itself, and that includes the Zen fire hose. We have the block rewards, which is essentially the appearing out of nowhere Zen that will be distributed to miners and node operators. Then we have the miners, the node operators. We have a bucket for shielded transactions. And then everyone else falls into the user category. Are they definitely people? Are they businesses? Are they investors? We don't know for sure, but we call them the remaining bucket of people, we call them users. So we break users into two categories, which is smaller wallets and top movers. If you explore the rest of the co-op, you'll see sometimes we are able to display top holders based on balances. For Horizen, we may do that in the future, but for now, we're looking at top movers. And the key reason to split out top movers is so that you can get a feel for the breakdown of what amount of the volume on a chain is being driven by a smaller amount of people, because you know that blockchains in particular, but many different things that you might analyze have the characteristic of, 10% of the addresses are responsible for 90% of the volume. And so breaking out the smaller frequency users to the top high frequency users in this way gives you a little bit of insight into that. So basically, we can watch this bubble chart go, and you can see throughout the month how Zen is moving around on the blockchain. So one thing I could point out is that block rewards get distributed to the foundation, but also to miners. So the block rewards for node operators go over to the foundation and then periodically are distributed out to node operators. And then you can watch node operators sending to other users, sending to exchanges, receiving from exchanges, sending into shielding. And that's our asset flow chart. And then on the left, we have similar information that is in the bubble chart, but in block form. So you get a breakdown of the inflows and outflows to exchanges, inflows and outflows to network operators, and then the same thing for top movers, and then the daily price, because of course, we always want to connect back to price, because price movements, being able to have a visual explanation for price movements is always really cool. And I will note about exchanges, one thing that we do at Flipside, which is really cool, is we don't just show, the Bittrex and the Binance hot wallet. We have algorithms that find the entire ecosystem, not just for the known exchanges, not just for the big guys, but due to the really specific way that exchanges conduct business, we're able to find algorithmically all of the exchanges on a blockchain and their entire ecosystem of deposit wallets and sometimes cold wallets and their network of hot wallets, and display all of that as the exchange. So you're not just looking at the one or two hot wallets that everybody knows about, you're looking at the full exchange ecosystem. And that applies to all of the different chains that we have in our co-op. And then we have sort of a little bit more typical data displayed at the bottom for benchmarks. And the benchmarks that we use are from all of the other chains that we've chain walked. We take a rolling median of the volume, transactions, unique entities, and on other chains that would be just addresses, and the FCAS score. And our FCAS score, I won't go too much into that, but there's a lot about it on our site. It's our way of having a non-price based way to compare different projects and blockchains. And yeah, I think that I've explained a little bit quickly, but maybe I'll turn it over to Rowan to see if there's anything he'd like to add.
Thanks, Angela. One thing I just wanted to kind of further clarify, and you obviously mentioned it when you were running through this, the aim of kind of this type of data isn't to hone in on individuals and individual behavior. It's really to categorize different groups within the ecosystem, and then to try and understand how those groups interact with each other so that we can make informed decisions. And I don't just mean we as in the foundation, as in Horizen, I mean we as an entire ecosystem. Every individual person in the entire ecosystem can make more informed decisions about how they're conducting their own business, be that a miner or a node operator or us as Horizen developing products for end users, whatever the case may be. So I just want to make sure it's really clear that's not at all the aim here. Clearly the data that's displayed here is the data from the fully transparent chain of Horizen, or the transparent transactions, should I say. Although we can obviously see the inflows and outflows into the kind of shielded pool, which is actually really interesting to see as well. It's interesting to see how frequently that's being used. Yeah, that's kind of the main thing I wanted to add to there.
Yeah, right. Our goal at Flipside, our goal has always been to be able to answer this really vague question, which is like, what is happening on a chain and who is doing it? And that's been our challenge the whole time, but we've actually gotten to answer that question for a lot of chains. And so when we put it in this format, you can see really quickly, like, what is there to do on this chain and who's doing it, basically. You know, if Horizen was in a situation where the miners were just immediately liquidating all of their mining rewards, you'd be able to see that really easily.
Absolutely. The insights that come from this are really, really useful. It helps us make much more informed decisions about how we operate, which is certainly very, very valuable. One thing that's also worth highlighting that I thought was particularly interesting, if we scroll down a little bit, if that's possible.
To the second section?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that stood out for me here is just how many unique entities. And if you remember, when we talk about entities, that's kind of when we're really trying to figure out whether or not a group of addresses all belong to a particular entity. And that may be an organization, or it may be a mining pool, or it may be a person. It could be anything. We're trying to kind of establish, kind of group together activity. But just the sheer number of unique entities, particularly versus the kind of benchmark or the baseline here, really, really interesting and really kind of positive to see that there's so many unique entities operating in this ecosystem. Yeah. So at the moment, you can see we've got a kind of lower than average transaction count, but that transaction count is coming from a much above average number of users. For me, that's something particularly interesting.
Having a more active population, yeah. Yeah, and those are the active per day too, not just existing.
I would like to maybe kind of like open to discussion, like what this partnership means to us. Rowan, if you could explain a little bit more the importance of this and share with the community.
Sure, absolutely. So we first started working with Flipside because we realized that day to day we were making decisions based upon what were ultimately educated assumptions. We were assuming that something was happening because of a particular reason, and we were taking action based upon those assumptions. And what we realized quite quickly is that there were people in the industry that had products that could really help demystify and really help provide us with high quality data to drive our decision making going forward. So Flipside was the company we ended up partnering with on that front, and we gave them a couple of challenges. And I think Angela can probably attest to how tricky some of those were to execute. But ultimately, Flipside managed to deliver a kind of set of products for us that enable us to make much more educated and informed decisions, which have had a pretty immediate impact on a variety of different areas of what we're trying to achieve. Jonathan, for example, Director of Growth, has been making more informed decisions about how they manage the kind of community hub or the Horizen faucet, and what we need to do differently to enhance growth, things that work and things that don't work so well. We've also managed to make some more informed decisions about how we reach out to particular mining entities or pools, and also even exchanges, to try and make sure that everything that we're doing is kind of backed up by something solid, something real, rather than just a kind of educated guess. So day to day, it's had a big impact on how we operate. Although, like I said, I'm sure Angela had a little bit of a headache trying to make some of it actually happen.
You know, I did. No, it's with the shielding and the UTXO style. It's challenging. It's a challenging chain, but we are always up for a challenge. And actually, it was kind of fun. I'm not gonna lie.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, I would like to just kind of like recap on everything we've mentioned. You already explained to us how it worked, Angela. So something that comes to mind is, for example, what is some of the most interesting things that you have seen or pick up from the projects you're analyzing, or even from Horizen, and things that you find interesting and said, hey, this is good. They are having this behavior or things like that. What can you share with our community for them to pick up the highlights?
One thing that I've noticed on Horizen is actually a lack of something, which is price changes driving huge bubble movements to exchanges. So I will not call out any other chains, but I have certainly seen the case where a price drop has people liquidating as fast as they can. And that's people who have on-chain currency. That's not just people who own only through the exchange, excuse me. So I think that's an indication that Horizen has a certainly really solid user base that you don't see. I mean, it's actually kind of funny it's fun to watch. I mean, not funny, I'm not calling it funny. It's fun to watch. Sometimes you see these huge chunks of bubbles flowing from top movers or operators over to the exchanges just because the price dropped a little bit. And I don't see any of that on Horizen. So I think that's a really good thing. You know, I see a lot of activity. I think, like I said, we don't go all the way to some individual level, but certainly I see a really healthy mix of user to user transfers. I see that the miners and the node operators, they do accumulate some Zen and they do liquidate some Zen, but they're not doing primarily one or the other. And the key there is that it's about balance. It's about having a moderate, I'm lacking on the word scheme, I guess, or plan of what a miner or a node operator wants to do with the Zen that they're earning. If their plan is to simply liquidate everything they get or to hold everything they get, then they're not really contributing to the network in an optimal way. But we see on Zen or on Horizen that they're doing a little bit of both, and that indicates something really positive about the chain. I wish there was something like really dramatic, but it's actually better that there's nothing really dramatic that you can see on this co-op page, because it indicates that the network is relatively healthy.
Yeah, we definitely don't want giant dramatic things to be seen, that's for sure. It's interesting because I guess one of the reasons why we don't see that kind of mass liquidation whenever there's a price movement in either direction is that we have a kind of a large user base for a start is a huge help. Not everybody's going to make the same decision. So having a very large base of users kind of disperses that desire to run to exchange whenever there's a big movement. But also having the network of nodes, people are kind of incentivized not to do that. But it's worth highlighting that our node network isn't just a node network for kind of no reason. So there's a roadmap of kind of software that's going to be delivered, starting with the big release, which is just coming up very, very soon, and that's our sidechain beta. So that's planned to be coming out in a kind of beta preview type mode in late June. So very, very, very soon. And once we have sidechains operational, the kind of ultimate plan for the node network starts to come into play, where the nodes are actually acting as the foundation infrastructure to run sidechains on top of. So really interesting to see that it's having a positive impact on, I guess, stability, as well as also providing us with the real infrastructure that we need to build out the sidechain system that we have been building for quite some time now.
Sure. One other thing that also comes to mind, for example, is apart from what we have seen in all of these very important data and analysis, what else are we planning to do with this data? I mean, what's kind of like our vision with this cooperation with Flipside, Rowan?
So the vision going forward is just to make sure that we have, like I said before, tangible data to base decisions upon. So there's not going to be a dramatic shift in how we operate. That's not the plan at all. It's just to make sure that the decision makers within the organization and the community, who are ultimately the real decision makers here, have the data that they need to make educated decisions going forward. And I think that's really, really important and a real benefit to the ecosystem as a whole.
Awesome. Angela, anything else you would like to add before we move on to the Q&A session?
I would just add that hopefully you all already know that this is publicly available to anyone, as well as all of the other chains that we have listed on here are available for anyone to look at any time. And we're adding new chains all the time, something like one a week, more or less. So I hope you come back and keep looking.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start now with the Q&A session in part. So I'm seeing here, I'm getting some very interesting questions, and please just let me know which one is your favorite. Each one of you can pick one, so 2 winners can have a $20 free to spend in our Horizen store. So the first question is, are Horizen sidechains similar to Bitcoin Liquid, and how?
I'm going to have to be really honest here and say that I don't actually know a huge amount about Bitcoin Liquid, but maybe I can answer by fleshing out a little bit as to what Horizen sidechains are. So a Horizen sidechain is effectively a blockchain in and of itself. And the reason that, in fact, take a back step, the reason we went down this path in the first place is that one of the kind of fundamental issues we see that needs to be solved in order for anybody in this industry to get any kind of real world traction and have users at scale using the products, one of the big fundamental problems we need to solve is scalability. And there are obviously lots and lots and lots of different ways to solve scalability. And I presume Liquid is one such solution, as is off-chain type systems like Lightning and similar, or even systems that try and increase the transactional throughput. One thing we were considering previously was moving the main chain of Horizen to a block DAG, or a block-based DAG. And what that would have done is dramatically increase the throughput of the main Horizen chain. Ultimately, after a lot of research and development and a lot of thought and a lot of learning from peers in terms of what has worked well and what is working well elsewhere, and trying to kind of build upon that knowledge, the decision was made to go down a sidechain route to solve the scaling issue. So rather than trying to cram as much as you possibly can through one individual chain. The idea here is to have bespoke blockchains for bespoke products. So if you want to launch an application or a product or a service, rather than trying to make it kind of A, adhere to the logic of the main chain, and B, fit within the capacity of the main chain, you have the ability to deploy a Horizen sidechain, which is decoupled from the main chain. And that's kind of interesting because the decoupling gives you the flexibility to use a different consensus mechanism or a different programming language or whatever kind of logic you need to make that product or service work correctly. And it provides dedicated resource for your app, product, or service. So it kind of brings us to a good analogy is like the hub and spoke model, where rather than having one giant airplane like the big Airbus A380 that seemed to be a bit of a failure, having smaller airplanes for particular purposes seemed to work. And this is kind of similar, hub and spoke model. So rather than one giant chain, we have bespoke deployed side chains for bespoke purposes.
Awesome. Thank you, Rowan. Next question is for Angela, and it says, how did Flipside come up with the idea for chain walking?
So we started with just Ethereum and Bitcoin. And by started, I mean, that's the data that we had. And we realized that crypto is a lot more than just Ethereum and Bitcoin. And we also at the same time had developed the FCAS score. And a goal of ours since the very beginning was always to be able to understand the difference between speculative and user behavior. Because basically, if you look at a chain and you want to know, is this chain doing well? Is this something I should invest in, not just with my money, but with my time? Are people doing on this chain whatever it was built for? There are many reasons to have a blockchain, but are people using it for whatever it was built for, or are they just speculating? And so the main driver of speculative behavior is what is the proportion of volume that is just back and forth with exchanges versus everything else that can happen on a chain. And so in order to really answer that question for ourselves, we found we couldn't really rely on third-party data. We needed to get as much of our own data as possible. But that is like a really daunting idea because blockchain data, each blockchain is really particular. It has all of its own quirks, and learning the quirks of every single blockchain is nearly untenable. And so we developed this process to work with the chains themselves to interpret their data and do it in a streamlined way that is certainly not instantaneous, but rather quick in this grand scheme of things, to be able to ingest blockchains, the data from as many blockchains as possible in a quick but efficient and understandable way.
Of course. Thank you, Angela. So another one for you is, does this data include the OTC transactions? If yes, which category?
OTC would be off-chain.
OTC as in over the counter. So it's just a different way of selling or buying. So if somebody wanted, for example, to buy a large amount of Bitcoin or Zen or Ethereum or anything like that, they would potentially, rather than going to an exchange where they'll have some level of price slippage, placing a large order, they'll quite regularly go to one of the large over-the-counter desks. So it's still on-chain. It would for sure be in that data set somewhere. I'm not sure how you guys would categorize it. I presume it would be somewhere in the user category, I guess.
Yeah, so it depends on how the OTC operates. So having access to all this on-chain data, I have actually seen, with our own personal addresses, so I know this is really what's happening, I've seen someone interact with an OTC desk, but actually the address that they gave was a Binance deposit wallet. So sometimes the OTC is actually operating underneath of an exchange, but other times they are operating on their own. If they operate in a way that looks like an exchange, they'll get rolled in. But the real answer to the question is no, we haven't developed a way to specifically identify OTC trades or transfers, but they are 100%, if they're on chain, they're in the data.
Of course. Okay, so next one would be for Rowan, and this one says, how does all of this translate into key partnerships?
It would help if I wasn't on mute, wouldn't it? So this data helps in a variety of different ways. And one of the things, or one of the actionable outputs that we took not that long ago was that we needed to focus more attention on A, educating, but also B, having a closer relationship with some of our mining pools. And more importantly, the miners themselves. So we quite quickly realized that we're fortunate to have a very engaged community. And when we look at how the miners are typically behaving, they're behaving as you would expect a mining entity to do. They have a level of speculation where they'll kind of mine well in advance of any kind of desired outcome, and they will hold for a period of time. But they'll obviously have a time where they need to pay bills, because miners are essentially swapping electricity for cryptocurrency, is the simplest way to put it. So there comes a time where miners are going to need to liquidate. And what we wanted to do was try and have a closer working relationship with some of the larger miner pools, and also try and find ways to really get them more engaged with the Horizen ecosystem. So miners may want to liquidate amounts of Zen to pay electricity bills, but alternatively, it could be worthwhile for a larger miner to set up nodes and start earning a kind of separate stream of revenue that way to help offset electricity. So there was things that became apparent when we first started digging into this data that started to drive how we target particular segments of the ecosystem to create new collaborative relationships.
Of course. Okay, so there's another one that says, is there a way to improve certain scores that Horizen shows? So the ones we currently have, how can we improve them?
I was just going to say that Flipside are kind of sworn to their own secrecy. We've obviously asked a few million times what we can do differently, or what we could do better, or what we could change to impact that score. But I just want to jump in here by saying that I have massive respect for the fact that Flipside will not budge on this. And I think it's really important to the entire industry that they don't, because as soon as scores start to be gamed, they become completely meaningless. So the fact that we have no idea how to game our score is a good thing. But I'll obviously let Angela answer that a little bit better.
We do describe a little bit what the scores are based on, just not specifically how they're calculated, because gaming, you could game a blockchain counts of this or counts of that pretty easily. But I will say that, like I mentioned before, something that we really focus on is that a chain is being used for its intended purpose. So get everyone to use Horizen, and then they'll have a higher score.
Of course. So this one is for Angela, and it says that if you help build up this platform.
Did I? Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm a very entrenched in the Horizen data. I started working with this Horizen data back in, I think, the fall, and I had to actually develop a way to algorithmically find exchanges on a UTXO chain, which is a lot more difficult than on an address by address chain. We had to develop ways to work with the shielding, the entity clustering. I've done it all. We're not a huge company yet, maybe one day. Yeah, the reason I'm on this call is because I was so responsible for all of the underlying data. I will say I did not build the front end, and I did not do the design work, and I could not have done that without my amazing teammates. But the underlying data, that's me.
It's awesome. I think this is one of the top questions, Angela. Very, very interesting for sure. Okay, next one is for Rowan, and it says if our side chains are going to be included into all of this analysis.
I think they absolutely have to be. I think it's going to be really interesting to start to observe the flow of Zen in and also out of sidechains once sidechains are operational. So yeah, I think for sure it has to be. And for that, I apologize, Angela. I guess that's another little mission for you guys to complete when the time comes.
Giving us new data to work with, I think you should not apologize, you should brag.
Awesome. Okay, so we're getting at almost the end of the questions, but for sure some of them are very interesting. Next one is, can I go to a different chain and interpret the same data the way you just did for Horizen?
Yes. So every chain that we have on the co-op is meant to be as comparable as possible. I will say the bubble size, the size of each dot is relative to each chain, but otherwise we have a really similar structure. So you know that when you go to each different chain, you'll see what's available to be done on the chain on that circle. And, you know, a miner sending to an exchange is interpreted the same way from chain to chain, even if the exchange structure is different or what it means to be a miner is different. That flow of group to group has the same interpretation on every chain that we have. Chain, and I will also say projects, we have ERC20 tokens, not just full blockchains.
Awesome. Okay, so the last question is, what programming languages will this sidechain SDK support?
Good question. Like I mentioned before, one of the kind of unique features of having sidechains completely decoupled is that we have the flexibility, or they can offer the flexibility to use whatever programming language best suits the product or the application that's being built. That said, we realize fully that it's quite daunting to jump into a completely new SDK and start from scratch. So the idea is to provide a reference design sidechain, and that can kind of be the starting point for people to start experimenting with what's possible to be built on top of this system. And that SDK is written in Java. Why do we pick Java? Well, it's a very, very widely used programming language. It's accessible. And as a result, there should be a good number of people that can pretty quickly get up to speed, understand how to use it, understand how to deploy, and most importantly, start making them useful, start making useful products and services on top of this tech stack.
Of course. Okay, so seems like we have one more. So yeah, well, in the meantime, while I get the last question, I'll just have you guys pick up your top questions for the winners?
I'll pick the one about what can Horizen do to improve their FCAS score.
Awesome. And you, Rowan?
I think I'll go with the very first question that I was asked, because that's the one that made me think the most.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so there's one more, and this one is for Angela, and it says, how long have you been working for the project?
Since 2018, the end of 2018.
Awesome. And then there's another one for you, Angela. Seems the community is very, very excited. So it says, does the development score look at all branches in code repositories? For instance, the Horizen development process is to do modular development and integrate and post to master when tested or mature.
I don't know the specific answer to that question.
No worries.
I don't know how to
help a little bit with that one, I think.
Go ahead.
Just because I've been kind of a little bit more involved in the FCAS side of Flipside's product offering, but we do a lot of work behind the scenes in private before we move to our kind of public repositories on GitHub. And we do that for a variety of different reasons that I won't get into. but that posed a problem for Flipside because they were trying to establish a kind of comparative score for the activity that Horizen was carrying out on a day-to-day basis in terms of development activity versus other projects without seeing the full picture. So they have this kind of cool thing where they can, with our permission, they can review the metadata from these private repos, and they can use that metadata to establish kind of the level of activity and the type of activity that's happening without actually seeing the data itself, which is pretty cool. And that allowed them to start considering all of the active work, or as a much larger percentage of the active work than what they were seeing before. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Rowan. I know that we do that for a lot of projects actually, but I did not know off the top of my head if we had gone through that with you guys.
Awesome. Okay, so there's another one. It says, if you're also responsible for other Flipside projects, Angela.
Yeah, almost all of them. I mean, I'm not personally responsible, but like I said, we're very small. I think maybe 20 people. I can't remember the exact number, but most of the other chains that you see listed, I've either been responsible for all of the data analysis or I've had my hand in it. Our data science team is really small at this point. We've grown. We're 3 people. I think that's fine to say. And we're also responsible for the FCAS, for example. So I've done a lot of this background work myself, and happily we are growing the team. But yeah, most of any of the other co-ops that you see, I either did all the background data or was involved in it.
Of course, yeah, I know. We know that you're one of the ones that it's very close to us and supervising and seeing everything. Okay, so they keep coming. I mean, is Flipside building any other exciting platforms?
Oh, we are building one really exciting one, but I can't talk about it yet. Why did you have to ask that? You know that future development is a secret. But I would say definitely stay tuned. We will continue churning out these co-ops, and we have more things coming down the line.
Of course, but it keeps things very, very exciting. So I think it's gonna give us all like this sense of curiosity to keep getting to know more about what you guys are doing. Is there an estimated time arrival for the exciting secret platform? I mean,
no.
Okay.
Come on, we just launched this co-op product. This is our first really big public-facing product. We have a lot of things that are just for our clients, but we were so excited to launch this co-op project, and we're in a sense still building it because we're still releasing more chains. But no.
Of course. Okay, so is there anything else that you guys would like to add? Rowan, any more comments?
I would just like to express a huge thank you to Angela and to Flipside for jumping in, providing the support, providing continuous high quality data for us to take action on, and being part of the ecosystem. Huge thank you. And obviously to everybody that's taken the time out of their day to come and listen to us here. So huge thanks to the community as well.
I'd love to say thank you to you guys too. We really like working with you, everyone that we've worked with, and I think it's amazing the community that you have that will come out to be so interested in this product and your chain and supporting you. And that's amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. I think this was a great session. So everyone watching right now, you all get a 15% discount in our Horizen store with the code FlipsideSen, if I'm not mistaken. So please make sure to check it out. I'll thank you both as well again, and I hope to see you all very, very soon.
Thanks, everyone.